The music was still playing when Princess Charlotte suddenly stopped walking. Across the glittering palace ballroom, something on Queen Camilla's hand caught the light, and Charlotte knew exactly what she was looking at. It was the diamond ring she had always associated with her mother, Catherine. Within moments, the young princess refused to continue the gala procession. William turned toward Camilla, and what had begun as a carefully controlled royal evening descended into stunned silence. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charlotte reached for William's sleeve. "That's Mummy's ring," she whispered. The prince initially thought his daughter had confused it with another piece, but one glance changed him. Catherine stood beside him, without moving because she recognized the diamond setting immediately. She had never agreed to lend it, and she had never expected to see it on Camilla. The gala carried weight. Senior relatives, diplomats, and invited guests had gathered for a palace celebration, and the procession, the organized entrance of the royal family before assembled guests, was meant to project calm and unity. Charlotte had seen Catherine wear that ring during private family occasions. To her, it was not expensive jewelry. It carried memories of her mother, making its appearance on someone else's hand deeply personal. William placed a hand on Charlotte's shoulder and told her to remain beside him. She was upset not over diamonds or money, but because she believed something belonging to Catherine had been taken without her knowledge. Catherine looked toward Camilla again. The queen lowered her hand. No explanation had been offered. No permission had been mentioned. Charles noticed the break in the procession and approached. He looked first at Charlotte, then William, and finally Camilla. The king understood this was no childish interruption. Catherine's silence told him something was wrong. He fixed his attention on the ring and asked the question that changed the evening that night. "Where did you get that?" Camilla did not answer at once. She lowered her hand as Catherine realized the ring must have been removed from a private collection she believed was secure. William's concern hardened into controlled anger. Someone had accessed it, moved it, and placed it into the queen's possession without Catherine being told. William called a senior aide closer and ordered the adjoining ballroom doors closed. Guests were left waiting as the family remained inside. The gala had stopped, but the confrontation had only begun. The question was no longer why Charlotte had halted the gala. It was how something Catherine believed safely stored away had ended up on Camilla's hand. Charlotte had noticed the diamonds first, but Catherine recognized something far more painful: the history attached to them. She knew the tiny imperfection beneath one stone, the unusual setting, and the private memory connected to the ring. There was no possibility of confusion. As William watched his wife's face change, the atmosphere shifted from embarrassment to something much more serious. Catherine was no longer wondering whether the ring was hers. She was wondering who had touched it. Catherine stepped closer to Camilla and asked her to hold her hand still. She did not touch the ring. She did not need to. The setting and slight flaw beneath one diamond confirmed everything. "That is mine," she told William quietly. The words carried more force because she refused to raise her voice. The ring had been kept inside a restricted private jewelry collection, meaning trusted staff controlled access to pieces not routinely used for official appearances. Catherine had believed that boundary was secure. Charlotte looked down, worried that stopping the procession had caused trouble. Catherine turned to her and reminded her that speaking up when something felt wrong was not a mistake. The girl knew the ring because her mother had once placed it in her hands during a family moment. Catherine had explained that some possessions mattered because of memory, not price. Charlotte remembered that lesson and now feared someone had ignored it. Camilla finally spoke. She said the ring had been presented to her before the gala among jewelry approved for the evening, and she had assumed its presence meant permission had been given. William immediately asked who authorized the selection. No answer came. The aide responsible for coordinating the jewelry could not be found, and attempts to reach that person failed. The Queen's explanation shifted the problem instead of solving it. If she had not requested the ring, someone else had placed Catherine's property into her selection. Charles watched Catherine move away from the center of the room, her composure holding, while the hurt beneath it became impossible to miss. The king understood this was no ordinary mix-up. He ordered that no one leave the private royal wing, the secured part of the palace reserved for family and senior household use, until the ring's path was traced. William stayed close to Catherine, while Charlotte remained beside her mother, shaken, but no longer apologizing. Then Catherine remembered something. Months earlier, someone had asked a specific question about that ring. At the time, the conversation seemed harmless. Now it felt different. And when Catherine remembered who had once asked her about that exact ring, the strange appearance at the gala began to look far less accidental. 3 months before the gala, Catherine had been sitting in a private Windsor drawing room when a seemingly harmless conversation took an unexpected turn. Camilla had admired several pieces Catherine rarely wore, then asked one unusually specific question about a diamond ring kept outside the normal ceremonial collection. Catherine thought little of it at the time. Now, standing inside the halted gala with that very ring on Camilla's hand, she understood why the forgotten exchange suddenly mattered. Catherine remembered the private tea clearly now. Camilla had spoken casually about pieces used for major royal appearances, and nothing about the exchange had seemed unusual at first. Ceremonial jewelry meant pieces made available for formal duties and public occasions, while Catherine kept some items separate because their meaning was personal rather than official. The Queen had discussed jewelry with her before, so Catherine had no reason to treat the conversation as a warning. Then Camilla asked whether the diamond ring might someday be folded into a future senior royal collection. Catherine answered without hesitation. The ring was personal, she said, and she intended to keep it within her own family. Camilla did not argue, and the subject moved on. That quiet Windsor tea now felt like the point of no return, because the boundary had been spoken plainly and heard by the person now wearing the ring. William's anger sharpened when Catherine told him about that exchange. He no longer saw the gala incident as a simple administrative mistake. Someone already knew the ring was off limits, and Charlotte had been forced to witness the result. Catherine felt more disturbed by that than by the jewelry itself. Her daughter had watched a private family boundary appear to vanish in public. William knew that fact changed the entire weight of the night. A senior aide checked the jewelry access record and found the next piece of the puzzle. The ring had been removed from storage earlier that afternoon under a valid senior household request. An access record was the internal log showing when a restricted item was moved and under whose authority. The wording made William stop. Approved for temporary family presentation. Catherine immediately said she had never approved those words. William read the entry twice, set the record flat on a side table, and turned toward Camilla without speaking. The aide then identified the source. The authorization had come through an office directly connected to the Queen Consort's household. Camilla remained silent, as the prince absorbed what that meant. The gala had begun with Charlotte asking why Camilla was wearing the ring. Now William was preparing to ask who had given her household the authority to take it. The ballroom doors closed, the orchestra stopped, and the royal family moved into a smaller adjoining chamber. There were no cameras inside, and no audience to impress. William stood opposite Camilla, with Catherine and Charlotte behind him, while Charles positioned himself between two sides of a dispute that had suddenly become painfully personal. Then the prince asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Who gave permission to remove Catherine's ring? William did not soften his words. He reminded Camilla that Catherine had already refused to place the ring into any shared royal collection, meaning jewelry made available for use across official family occasions. The issue was not rank, Charles added firmly. Being queen did not mean every private possession inside the palace became available to her. Ownership still mattered. Permission still mattered. And Catherine had already given her answer months earlier. Camilla held William's gaze and insisted she believed the matter had been settled after that earlier conversation. The prince's anger sharpened immediately. Catherine stepped forward before he could answer and spoke directly to the queen. She had never changed her decision, she said. Not once. Charlotte watched her mother remain controlled, but the hurt beneath that calm was impossible to miss. Catherine was defending more than a ring now. She was defending the meaning of her own word. Camilla denied personally ordering the ring removed. She explained that it had been delivered with the jewelry prepared for her before the gala, and that she assumed its presence meant final approval had been granted. Charles listened carefully, then asked the question that made the room fall quiet again. If she knew Catherine considered the ring personal, why had she not questioned its sudden appearance? Camilla hesitated. For several seconds, she offered no answer at all. The silence became unbearable. Camilla slowly removed the diamond ring herself and walked toward Catherine. She did not pass it to an aide. She placed it directly into Catherine's open palm. Neither woman spoke. Charlotte stayed close to her mother, while William watched the exchange without relaxing. The ring was back where it belonged, but the prince understood that returning it could not erase the decision that had put it there. William turned toward Charles and made his position clear. If Camilla had not requested the ring, then someone inside the palace had used her household, her authority, or her name to override Catherine's refusal. The king understood the danger immediately. Catherine had her ring back, but William now wanted something more difficult to recover. The truth about who had decided her wishes could be overridden. Returning the ring solved the visible problem. It did nothing to explain how the palace system had failed. Somewhere between Catherine's private collection and Camilla's gala preparations, an instruction had been issued, accepted, and carried out without Catherine ever being consulted. Charles understood the danger immediately. This was no longer about diamonds. It was about whether personal boundaries inside the royal household could quietly disappear when someone with enough authority wrote the right words on a request. Charles ordered the transfer trail reconstructed from the moment the ring left storage. Palace jewelry for major ceremonial evenings passed through a controlled chain. An item was logged, released, prepared, checked against the approved selection, worn, and then returned. Restricted family holdings meant privately controlled pieces that could not be moved through ordinary ceremonial access. Only a small number of people could approve such movement, which made the idea of a simple accident harder to accept. Charles sat alone with William and removed his glasses. The king admitted that the system should never have placed Catherine in this position. He had allowed lines between household authority and personal ownership to become too blurred. William listened without interrupting. His anger had cooled into something heavier, because Catherine had not been misunderstood. Her refusal had been known, and then treated as if it might not matter later. Camilla was shaken when the authorization trail reached her own household. The queen insisted she had not requested the ring, but the paperwork carried the authority of her office. A senior member of her jewelry staff was questioned and gave a documented account of what happened. The staff member said a discussion about family presentation pieces had been interpreted as permission to include the diamond ring among items prepared for the gala. Then the explanation became worse. The same staff member confirmed that Catherine's earlier refusal was known. It had simply been treated as something expected to change as the gala approached. William went quiet. The prince understood the real breach. Catherine's no had not been lost in paperwork. It had been downgraded into a temporary obstacle. Camilla realized that someone had acted not on her direct order, but on what they assumed she would eventually want. Charles took the copied authorization record, folded it once, and tore it down the middle. He told William the procedure would not stand. The king decided the response could not end with one corrected request or one staff member. Before the gala resumed, Catherine's private collection would be placed behind a personal approval that no household could override. The mistake had been identified, but Charles was about to make sure the palace could never repeat it again. By the time guests began wondering whether the gala would continue, Charles had already made his decision. The ring would be returned to Catherine immediately, the authorization would be withdrawn, and the system that allowed the transfer would be rewritten. Yet the most emotional consequence had nothing to do with palace procedure. Charlotte stood beside her mother, holding her hand, still struggling with the possibility that remaining silent might have allowed the evening to continue, as though nothing were wrong. Charles moved quickly. He ordered Catherine's personal jewelry inventory, separated completely from every collection available for automatic ceremonial selection. An inventory was simply the official list, showing what pieces were held, where they were stored, and who could authorize access. From that night forward, no aide, household office, or senior staff member could interpret silence as permission without even asking Catherine for confirmation. Catherine herself would have to approve every request involving her private pieces. Camilla received the decision without protest. The Queen understood that intention no longer mattered as much as consequence. Her household had become the route through which Catherine's boundary was crossed, and William's family now had reason to question whether private wishes were truly protected. William said little, but his distance made the damage clear. Camilla knew trust had shifted, even if no accusation was spoken aloud. Charlotte finally asked the question she had been holding back. Had she embarrassed everyone by stopping the gala? Catherine immediately knelt beside her, took both of her daughter's hands, and told her no. Speaking respectfully when something is wrong, she said, is not disloyalty. Charlotte had not caused the problem. She had noticed it. Catherine's reassurance eased the girl's fear, but it did not erase the shock of what had happened. Charles then approved a second consequence. The staff member who authorized the transfer was removed from jewelry duties while a full internal review began. William was also shown earlier requests in which Catherine's private collection had been loosely described as available for family use. None had resulted in an item being removed before, but the pattern disturbed him. The diamond ring was not an isolated misunderstanding. It was the first time a dangerous assumption had become action. Catherine placed the ring into a small case herself, rather than returning it to her finger. William watched her close it, understanding that possession had been restored before trust had been. Then Charlotte turned to him and quietly asked if they could speak alone before returning to the ballroom. The adults had spent the night debating authority, but Charlotte was about to remind William that the deepest damage had never been about palace rules at all. Away from the aides, advisors, and formal language, William finally asked Charlotte why seeing the ring had affected her so strongly. Her answer stripped away every argument about protocol. She remembered her mother showing her the ring during a quiet family moment and telling her that one day, precious things mattered because of the people connected to them, not because they belonged to a palace. Charlotte had not stopped the gala to challenge a queen. She had stopped because she believed someone had hurt her mother. William took Charlotte aside, where no staff, officials, or family advisors could hear them. He wanted the answer without palace language getting in the way. A royal protocol was simply the set of formal rules guiding how members of the monarchy behave during official events. But none of those rules mattered to the girl in that moment. Charlotte remembered Catherine placing the diamond ring in her hand months earlier and explaining that its value came from memory, family, and trust. Charlotte admitted she had been terrified after stopping the procession. Everyone had turned toward her, and for a few seconds, she thought she had embarrassed the family in front of the room. William crouched to her eye level and told his daughter she had nothing to apologize for. Courage, he said, did not always mean making a grand stand. Sometimes it meant refusing to ignore something important simply because everyone else kept walking. Then Charlotte told him the detail he had not known. Earlier that evening, She had noticed Catherine touch her bare ring finger more than once, almost as if something felt missing. That small gesture stayed in the girl's mind. So when Camilla lifted her hand later, and the diamonds caught Charlotte's attention, she looked carefully. She recognized the ring before any adult said a word. William fell quiet. The prince suddenly understood that his daughter had sensed Catherine's discomfort before the room understood there was a problem. Charlotte had not merely interrupted a royal gala. She had noticed her mother's unease, connected it to the ring, and acted while everyone else continued with the ceremony. Catherine joined them before Charlotte could say more. The girl apologized again, but her mother immediately pulled her close and told her the crisis was not hers to carry. Catherine thanked her for speaking. William watched the fear leave Charlotte's face and decided the family would return to the gala together. They would not pretend nothing had happened, but neither would they allow the night to become a memory of shame. When the ballroom doors finally reopened, the family returned differently, and the guests immediately understood that something extraordinary had happened behind them. The palace tried to restore the gala's rhythm, but one image had already defined the evening. Charlotte emerged holding Catherine's hand, William walking close beside them, while Camilla followed several steps behind without the diamond ring. No statement had yet explained the interruption, yet the contrast was impossible to miss. By morning, that single moment had become the photograph everyone was studying, not because of what it showed openly, but because of everything the distance between them seemed to suggest. Public attention moved quickly toward Charlotte. The palace confirmed in a formal statement that the gala had been paused because of a private family matter, and later acknowledged that an item of jewelry had been incorrectly released from a restricted collection. A restricted collection meant privately controlled pieces that could not be used for official events without direct permission. Catherine's authority over her own jewelry suddenly became the heart of the story, because the mistake had crossed a personal boundary, not merely broken an internal rule. Commentators divided almost immediately. Some worried that Charlotte had been pulled into an adult dispute she should never have had to face. Others focused on Catherine, praising the way she had reassured her daughter, instead of allowing the girl to carry the blame. Camilla faced a different kind of scrutiny. The palace clarified that she had not personally removed the ring from storage, yet her decision to return it directly to Catherine became one of the most discussed moments of the night. Morning brought the image into the open. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered as the first newspapers arrived, and one front page carried Charlotte holding Catherine's hand beneath the headline, "The Moment She Stopped the Gala." People stopped to read it. Broadcasters replayed the interruption, and one presenter framed the deeper issue clearly. Charles had already ordered an immediate change to palace procedure, proving that the dispute had produced real consequences rather than private embarrassment alone. Charles then allowed a second statement to make the new position unmistakable. Catherine retained exclusive authority over her personal jewelry collection, and no ceremonial request could override her approval. William supported the decision without qualification, while Camilla accepted the restriction even as public debate continued around her role. The rules had changed because Charlotte noticed what the adults had missed. Catherine later found her daughter looking at the newspaper photograph with obvious worry. She closed it and told Charlotte that one picture could not define what had happened between them, or decide how their family moved forward. Public opinion could debate the photograph endlessly, but only the people inside the family could decide what the ring would mean after the headlines disappeared. In the end, the most important moment happened without music, cameras, guests, or ceremony. Catherine sat with Charlotte and placed the diamond ring back inside its case. William stood nearby, while Charles had signed off on the new rules protecting her private possessions. Camilla had returned the ring and accepted the boundary that had been crossed. The crisis ended where it had truly begun, not with questions of rank or value, but with a daughter recognizing something precious to her mother and refusing to look away. Charles approved the revised access rules that night. Catherine alone would decide whether anything from her personal collection could be borrowed, displayed, or used for official events. The rules also removed the vague family presentation category, a palace label that had allowed staff to treat private pieces as potentially available for shared use. Responsibilities were reassigned. The mistaken approval was recorded, and the king made clear that assumption could never replace consent. Camilla later asked to speak with Catherine privately. The queen acknowledged that she should have questioned the ring's presence after their earlier Windsor conversation, even if she had not personally ordered its removal. Catherine accepted that admission, but made her position unmistakable. What belonged to her family could not be treated as negotiable, because palace staff expected her answer to change. Camilla accepted the boundary, and the tension between them began to ease. Catherine then turned to Charlotte. She told her daughter she was proud that she had noticed something was wrong, and trusted herself enough to speak. Charlotte admitted she had carried guilt since the procession stopped, but her mother refused to let that guilt remain. William listened and understood the larger lesson. Inside powerful institutions, silence can be mistaken for agreement, and a clear no can become dangerously weak when others assume it is temporary. Charles understood the same truth. The monarchy could have ceremony, hierarchy, and centuries of tradition, but none of those things could erase ownership, consent, or respect inside a family. Catherine opened the case one final time, placed the diamond ring on her own finger, and showed it to Charlotte. This time, the moment carried no fear. Mother and daughter smiled. The gala eventually continued. The music returned, and the palace doors reopened. But the meaning of that night had already been settled. Catherine's wishes were restored. Camilla accepted the line that had been crossed. Charles changed the rules, and Charlotte left the room, knowing that protecting someone you love can sometimes begin with having the courage to simply stop.